Marcus Chun felt the crushing weight settle on his shoulders like an invisible mountain. The gravity in the detention chamber had just tripled, and every breath now required conscious effort. Around him, his fellow human prisoners stumbled and fell, their bodies unable to cope with the sudden change. The metallic walls of their prison gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, and the air recycling system hummed with mechanical indifference. "Stay calm, everyone," Marcus called out, his voice strained but steady. As a former military engineer, he had trained in high-gravity environments before, though nothing quite like this. "Don't panic. We can adapt to this." The Zinthari guards watched through reinforced viewing panels, their insectoid features betraying no emotion. Their chitinous exoskeletons made them naturally suited to higher gravity environments, and they had used this advantage to subdue countless species across the galaxy. To them, humans were just another weak, fleshy race that would crumble under pressure. Commander Vextal clicked his mandibles in satisfaction as he observed the human prisoners struggling. "Increase gravity to 4 times standard," he ordered his subordinate. "Let's see how long these soft creatures can maintain consciousness." The pressure intensified again, and several humans collapsed entirely. But Marcus noticed something the aliens had missed. While his companions were falling, they were falling in controlled ways. Sarah, a construction worker from Mars Colony, had positioned herself near a wall for support. James, a zero-G cargo handler, was using breathing techniques to maintain blood flow. They were adapting faster than expected. "Listen to me carefully," Marcus whispered to those still conscious. "This isn't just punishment. They're testing us. They want to see our breaking point." He paused, feeling the weight trying to crush his ribcage. "But they don't understand human physiology. We evolved on a heavy world. Our bones are dense, our hearts are strong, and our muscles remember." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team's xenobiologist, managed a weak smile despite the crushing force. "The gravity of Earth is already higher than most inhabited worlds in this sector. They think they're torturing us, but they're just making us remember what home feels like." The Zinthari had captured their exploration vessel 3 days ago while they were conducting a peaceful survey mission in neutral space. The humans had offered no resistance, hoping diplomatic channels could resolve the situation. Instead, they found themselves imprisoned on charges of territorial violation, a crime punishable by slow execution through environmental torture. As the hours passed, something remarkable began to happen. The humans stopped falling. One by one, they found their footing. Marcus pushed himself up from the floor, his muscles screaming but responding. Sarah straightened her back against the wall. James began to move with careful, measured steps. The Zinthari guards exchanged confused clicks and chittering sounds. This wasn't how other species had reacted. Usually, by now, their prisoners would be unconscious or begging for mercy. Instead, these humans seemed to be growing stronger. "Impossible," muttered Vextal. "Increase gravity to 5 times standard. No organic being can function at that level without mechanical assistance." But Marcus was already adapting to the new pressure. His body remembered training sessions in the high-gravity chambers on Luna Base, where Earth's military prepared soldiers for combat on heavy worlds. The secret wasn't to fight the gravity, but to work with it. Let it compress your movements, make them more efficient, more purposeful. "Everyone listen," he said, his voice carrying clearly despite the oppressive atmosphere. "We're going to turn this into an advantage. Sarah, start with isometric exercises against the wall. James, practice your breathing patterns. Elena, analyze their reactions through the viewing ports." The other humans looked at him with confusion and exhaustion, but something in his tone sparked hope. They had been victims moments ago. Now, they were becoming something else. Marcus dropped to the floor and positioned his hands firmly on the cold metal surface. The gravity that should have been crushing him now became resistance training. He had done thousands of push-ups in his military career, but never under conditions like this. Each repetition was a declaration of human resilience, each breath a refusal to surrender. 1, he counted aloud. 2, 3. The Zinthari guards pressed closer to the viewing panels, their compound eyes reflecting disbelief. No species had ever responded to gravitational torture this way. Most begged for relief within hours. Some died from organ failure. None had ever turned their punishment into exercise. Through the observation window, Instructor Kethran approached Commander Vextal with obvious concern. As the ship's senior xenobiologist, he had studied dozens of captured species, and nothing in his research had prepared him for this human behavior. "Commander," Kethran's voice carried a note of scientific fascination mixed with alarm. "This is highly irregular. Their physiological responses are completely outside predicted parameters." Vextal's mandibles clicked irritably. "They're just showing defiance before the inevitable collapse. Increase gravity to 6 times standard. That will break their spirit." But, as the pressure increased again, Marcus continued his push-ups. His form remained perfect despite the crushing force. Around him, other humans began to follow his example. Sarah started doing wall sits, her legs burning but holding strong. James practiced deep breathing exercises that kept his blood oxygenated despite the heavy atmosphere. Dr. Vasquez, meanwhile, was making observations that would prove crucial. "Look at their body language," she whispered to her companions. "They're confused, frightened, even. This isn't going according to their plan." She was right. The Zenthari had conquered 17 different species using similar techniques. Environmental pressure, psychological intimidation, and physical helplessness usually broke prisoner morale within hours. But these humans were responding with organized resistance and what appeared to be structured training routines. Marcus completed his 20th push-up and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. His muscles ached, his lungs burned, but he was still functioning. More importantly, his actions were inspiring his companions and clearly disturbing their captors. 21, he called out, lowering himself again. 22. The gravity chamber had been designed as an instrument of torture and submission. Instead, it was becoming a gymnasium where human determination was being forged into something unbreakable. The Zenthari had wanted to demonstrate their superiority over another weak alien species. They were about to discover they had captured something far more dangerous than they realized. Instructor Kethran's research chamber buzzed with nervous energy as data streams flowed across multiple monitoring screens. For the past 6 hours, the human prisoners had been defying every scientific model the Zenthari possessed about biological limitations under extreme gravitational stress. His mandibles twitched with scientific curiosity and growing alarm. "Computer, display comparative analysis of subject responses to gravitational torture across all documented species," he commanded. Holographic charts materialized in the air before him, showing the physiological breakdown patterns of 17 different alien races. Every single graph showed the same trajectory: initial struggle, rapid deterioration, unconsciousness, and eventual organ failure. The human data stream, however, drew a completely different pattern. After an initial adjustment period, their vital signs had actually stabilized and, in some cases, improved. Back in the detention chamber, Marcus had reached his 50th push-up. The crushing weight that should have rendered him helpless had become a familiar pressure, like wearing heavy training gear. Around him, the other humans were discovering their own forms of resistance. Sarah had progressed from wall sits to actual squats, her powerful legs adapted from years of construction work in varying gravity environments. "You know what's funny?" she said between controlled breaths. "This reminds me of the job I had building the deep core mining stations on Titan. We worked in 2.5 Earth gravity for months." James nodded, continuing his breathing exercises. "Mars cargo handling requires constant adaptation to gravity wells between 0.3 and 1.8 standard. My cardiovascular system was designed for this kind of variation." Dr. Vasquez had positioned herself where she could observe both her companions and their captors through the viewing port. Her scientific mind was already forming hypotheses about their situation. They chose gravity as a torture method because it works on every species they've encountered. But they've never encountered a species that evolved on a world as gravitationally diverse as Earth. She was referring to something the Zenthari xenobiologists had missed in their hasty analysis of human physiology. Earth wasn't just a heavy world by galactic standards. It was a gravitationally complex world. Humans had evolved not just under strong gravity, but under constantly changing gravitational influences from multiple celestial bodies. Their bodies were naturally adaptive. Commander Vextal watched the monitoring displays with growing frustration. 7 times standard gravity, he ordered. If that doesn't break them, we'll increase environmental pressure and reduce oxygen content simultaneously. But as the gravity intensified again, something remarkable happened. Marcus didn't just continue his exercise routine, he modified it. The increased pressure forced him to adjust his form, making his movements more compact and efficient. Each push-up now required precise muscle control and perfect balance. 61. He counted, his voice steady despite the enormous strain. 62. Other humans began following his lead, adapting their own exercises to the new conditions. What the Zinthri had intended as escalating torture was becoming progressive resistance training. Instructor Kethran burst into the command center, his usually calm demeanor replaced by scientific excitement and genuine concern. "Commander, we need to stop this experiment immediately." "Explain," Vextal demanded, his attention still fixed on the monitoring screens. "I've been analyzing their physiological responses and comparing them to our database of Earth-based life forms. These humans aren't just surviving our gravitational torture, they're actively benefiting from it. Their muscle density is increasing, their bone structure is strengthening, and their cardiovascular efficiency is improving with each pressure increase." Vextal turned his compound eyes toward his science officer. "That's impossible. No organic being can adapt that quickly to environmental stress." "That's what I thought too, but look at their evolutionary background." Kethran activated a holographic display showing Earth's solar system. Their homeworld orbits a massive star with multiple large moons and neighboring planets. The gravitational forces on Earth's surface vary by up to 15% depending on celestial alignments. Their species evolved under constantly changing gravitational stress. The implications were staggering. Every other species the Zinthri had encountered evolved under stable gravitational conditions. Their bodies were optimized for their home environment, but couldn't adapt to rapid changes. Humans, however, had evolved with adaptation as their primary survival trait. Furthermore, Kethran continued, their historical records show they deliberately created artificial high-gravity environments for training purposes. Military personnel, athletes, and industrial workers routinely exposed themselves to conditions far beyond their planetary norm. They turned environmental stress into a tool for improvement. In the detention chamber, Marcus had become the focal point of an extraordinary display of human resilience. His companions weren't just following his example anymore. They were contributing their own expertise to the group's survival strategy. Dr. Vasquez had begun teaching everyone advanced breathing techniques based on her research into alien respiratory systems. The key is to maintain oxygen efficiency while your diaphragm works against increased pressure. Think of your lungs as flexible chambers that can operate under compression. James demonstrated movement patterns he had learned in zero-gravity cargo handling. In microgravity, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In high gravity, every movement needs to be calculated for maximum efficiency with minimum energy expenditure. Sarah shared construction techniques for working under adverse conditions. When you're building in hostile environments, you learn to use the environment itself as a tool. This gravity isn't our enemy. It's resistance training equipment. The humans were doing more than surviving. They were creating an impromptu training camp. They shared knowledge, supported each other, and turned their prison into a classroom for human endurance. Commander Vextal watched this transformation with growing unease. What happens if we continue increasing gravitational pressure? Kethran consulted his data streams. Based on their adaptation rate and physiological improvements, they could potentially function under gravitational forces that would kill most of our own species. We're not torturing them, Commander. We're making them stronger. The realization hit the Zinthri command structure like a shock wave. They had captured what they believed to be a weak exploration crew for routine interrogation and execution. Instead, they had imprisoned a group of beings whose evolutionary background made them ideally suited to turn any environmental stress into an advantage. Marcus completed his 100th push-up and stood slowly, feeling the incredible weight, but no longer struggling against it. His body had found its rhythm under the crushing pressure. Around him, the other humans had achieved similar adaptations. You know what the interesting thing is? Marcus said to his companions, making sure his voice carried to the viewing port where their captors watched in obvious confusion. They think this is punishment, but my training instructor back on Luna Base would have called this a light warm-up session. Dr. Vasquez smiled grimly. We should probably mention that Earth military training routinely includes exposure to up to 12 times standard gravity for equipment testing purposes. The Zinthari guards exchanged nervous clicks and chittering sounds. They were beginning to realize they had made a fundamental miscalculation about human capabilities. But Marcus was already thinking beyond their immediate situation. These aliens had revealed their primary method of breaking prisoner resistance, and humans had not only survived it, but mastered it. The question now was what other advantages this knowledge might provide. Everyone keep exercising, he said quietly, but start paying attention to their reactions. We're learning as much about them as they think they're learning about us. The detention chamber had become a laboratory where human adaptability was being tested and proven. Neither side had expected this outcome, but only the humans were prepared to exploit the new information they were gathering. The Zinthari High Council chamber buzzed with agitated clicking as Commander Vextal's report reached the ship's senior leadership. Supreme Chancellor Thexvar, a massive specimen whose chitinous armor bore the scars of dozens of conquest campaigns, listened with growing disbelief to the unprecedented situation developing in their detention facility. You're telling me that these humans have been under 8 times standard gravity for 12 hours, and are not only conscious, but actively exercising. The Chancellor's voice carried the authority of someone who had personally overseen the subjugation of 3-star systems. That's correct, Supreme Chancellor, Vextal replied, his confidence shaken. Our xenobiologist believes their adaptation capabilities exceed anything in our database. Meanwhile, in the detention chamber, Marcus had organized his companions into what could only be described as a military-style training rotation. The crushing gravity that was supposed to break their will had become the foundation for an impromptu fitness regimen that demonstrated human resilience in ways their captors had never imagined. Rotation change, Marcus called out. Sarah, you're on cardio duty. James, isometric holds. Elena, flexibility training. Everyone remember to maintain hydration and monitor each other for signs of distress. Dr. Vasquez had been conducting her own observations of their captors, and her findings were becoming increasingly important. Marcus, I've been watching their behavior patterns through the viewing port. They're not just confused, they're actually frightened. This outcome is completely outside their experience. She had noticed subtle changes in the guards' postures, the frequency of their communications, and the way they maintained distance from the viewing panels. The Zinthari were beginning to treat the human prisoners not as defeated captives, but as an unknown threat. What's our current gravity reading? James asked, completing a set of modified push-ups that would have been impossible for most species under normal conditions. Elena checked the environmental display that was visible through the transparent wall panel. We're at 8.5 Earth gravities now, and they're still increasing it gradually. But look at our adaptation curve. She gestured to her companions. We're not just surviving this, we're getting stronger. It was true. After 12 hours of progressive gravitational increase, the humans had developed an exercise routine that utilized the extreme conditions as resistance training. Their movements had become more efficient, their breathing more controlled, and their overall endurance had actually improved. Marcus paused in his own routine to consider their situation strategically. They're testing our limits, but they're also revealing their own capabilities. This level of gravitational manipulation requires enormous energy. They can't maintain this indefinitely without affecting the rest of their ship's operations. His military engineering background was proving invaluable for understanding the technical implications of their predicament. The amount of power required to generate and maintain variable gravity fields suggested advanced but energy-intensive technology. Supreme Chancellor Thexvar had called for a direct consultation with the ship's chief engineer to verify Marcus's unspoken assumption. Chief Engineer Zekmore's response confirmed human intuition about Zinthari limitations. The gravitational manipulation system is drawing 43% of our total power output, Zekmore reported. If we maintain current levels for more than another 6 hours, we'll need to reduce life support and propulsion capabilities across the entire vessel. This information would have been useful to Marcus and his team, but they were already drawing similar conclusions based on observable evidence. The lights in their detention chamber had dimmed slightly over the past few hours, and the air circulation system's rhythm had changed. They're pushing their own systems beyond normal operating parameters, Dr. Vasquez observed quietly. This level of environmental manipulation isn't standard procedure for them. They're improvising, which means they're as surprised by our resistance as we are by their capabilities. Sarah completed another set of gravity-assisted squats and moved to the viewing port where she could observe their captors directly. You know what's really interesting? They keep increasing the gravity, but they're not trying anything else. No temperature manipulation, no atmospheric changes, no psychological pressure. They're fixated on this one method. Her observation highlighted a crucial aspect of Xanthari psychology that would prove significant. As a species that had achieved dominance through environmental manipulation, they struggled to adapt when their primary method of control proved ineffective. James had been practicing breathing exercises that maintained blood flow and oxygen distribution under extreme pressure. In cargo handling, we learned that when one system fails, you don't keep pushing that system harder. You switch to backup procedures. These aliens seemed to be stuck in a single solution mindset. The humans were unconsciously conducting a real-time analysis of their captors' psychological and technological limitations while simultaneously proving their own adaptability. This combination of resilience and tactical thinking was something the Xanthari had never encountered. Marcus reached his 200th push-up and paused to address his team. Everyone listened carefully. We're not just surviving this anymore. We're gathering intelligence about their capabilities, their limitations, and their psychology. This information will be crucial when we decide how to proceed. The word when rather than if was significant. The humans were no longer thinking like prisoners hoping for rescue or release. They were thinking like soldiers gathering information about enemy capabilities while preparing for action. Dr. Vasquez had been conducting her own form of intelligence gathering through careful observation of Xanthari behavior patterns. I've identified at least 12 different individuals who have observed us through the viewing port. Their body language suggests a hierarchical command structure with clear chains of authority. The increased frequency of their consultations indicates our behavior is creating organizational stress. Commander Vextal was indeed experiencing organizational stress. His report to the High Council had prompted an emergency session where senior leadership was questioning not only his handling of the human prisoners, but the effectiveness of Xanthari interrogation techniques in general. In 17 previous conquest operations, gravitational torture has proved 100% effective within 6 hours, Supreme Chancellor Thexvar stated coldly. These humans have been under extreme pressure for 12 hours, and appear to be improving rather than deteriorating. Explain this failure. Vextal's mandibles clicked nervously. Supreme Chancellor, our xenobiological analysis may have been inadequate. These beings appear to possess adaptation capabilities that exceed our previous models of biological possibility. The admission was damaging to Xanthari confidence in their own scientific supremacy. They had built their entire conquest strategy around technological and biological superiority over other species. The existence of beings who could not only resist, but benefit from their most effective torture methods challenged fundamental assumptions about their place in the galactic hierarchy. Back in the detention chamber, Marcus had called for a strategy meeting. Under the pretense of sharing exercise techniques, the humans gathered to discuss their increasingly clear advantage. They've shown us their primary weapon, and we've proven it's ineffective against us, Marcus said quietly. The question now is whether we use this advantage to escape, to negotiate, or to turn this situation around entirely. Sarah grinned despite the crushing gravity pressing down on all of them. I vote for turning it around. These aliens captured us because they thought we were weak. Maybe it's time to show them what humans are really capable of when we're properly motivated. The detention chamber had become a crucible where human determination was being forged into something the Xanthari had never encountered, a captured species that was becoming more dangerous with each passing hour rather than more compliant. The Xanthari ship's power grid flickered for the third time in the past hour, and Chief Engineer Zekmore's stress pheromones were becoming detectable even through the ship's air filtration system. The gravitational manipulation system had been running beyond design specifications for 18 hours, and critical systems were beginning to show strain. Supreme Chancellor, Zekmore reported through the communication system, "We're approaching cascade failure conditions. The humans' resistance to gravitational torture is forcing us to maintain power draws that threaten ship integrity." In the detention chamber, Marcus completed his 400th push-up and stood slowly, his body now perfectly adapted to what was nearly 10 times Earth's gravity. Around him, his companions had achieved similar mastery over conditions that should have been lethal hours ago. "Time for Phase 2, Marcus announced quietly to his team. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her own exercise routine. "What do you have in mind?" "We've proven we can survive their worst environmental torture. Now we demonstrate that we can thrive under conditions they can't even tolerate." Marcus moved to the center of the chamber, where he was clearly visible through the viewing port. Everyone watched their reactions carefully. What Marcus did next would become legendary in human military academies for generations to come. Under crushing gravity that would have killed most galactic species within minutes, he began a formal military calisthenics routine with precision and intensity that suggested the extreme conditions were barely affecting him. His movements were sharp, controlled, and powerful. Each exercise was performed with textbook form despite the enormous gravitational pressure. He executed jumping jacks, burpees, mountain climbers, and combat conditioning drills with the kind of crisp efficiency that marked elite military training. The Zinthari guards pressed closer to the viewing panels, their compound eyes reflecting disbelief and growing fear. They were watching a demonstration of physical capability that their own species couldn't match under normal gravity, let alone under the extreme conditions they had imposed. Sarah joined Marcus's demonstration, adding her own expertise from construction work in hostile environments. Her routine included functional movements that showcased human strength and endurance, carrying invisible loads, climbing motions, and balance exercises that proved her inner ear and proprioceptive systems were functioning perfectly under extreme pressure. James contributed cargo handling techniques that demonstrated fine motor control and spatial awareness. He moved through his routine with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to working in variable gravity environments, making the crushing force look like a minor inconvenience rather than a torture method. Dr. Vasquez performed flexibility and coordination exercises that proved human nervous system function wasn't just intact, but operating at peak efficiency. Her movements were precise and controlled, demonstrating that cognitive function, balance, and muscular coordination were all enhanced rather than impaired by the gravitational stress. Commander Vextal watched this display with growing horror. "Increase gravity to 12 times standard," he ordered desperately. "Sir," his engineering officer responded, "that would exceed our power generation capacity. We'd have to shut down life support to secondary sections of the ship." "Do it." But as the gravity increased again, something remarkable happened. The humans didn't just adapt, they modified their demonstration to showcase even greater capability. Marcus transitioned to advanced military conditioning exercises that utilized the increased resistance as training equipment. 1,000, he counted aloud, completing his 1,000th push-up under conditions that would have crushed most organic beings. This is what human military basic training looks like, everyone. The psychological impact on their captors was immediate and profound. The Zinthari had conquered 17 different species by demonstrating technological and physical superiority. Now they were watching prisoners who had turned their most effective torture method into a workout routine that exceeded their own physical capabilities. Supreme Chancellor Thexvar arrived at the viewing area personally, his massive form barely fitting through the observation corridor. What he saw challenged everything the Zinthari believed about their place in the galactic hierarchy. "This is impossible," he stated flatly. "No organic being can function under these conditions." Dr. Vasquez looked directly at the viewing port and smiled. "Chancellor Thexvar, I presume? I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, xenobiologist. Would you like me to explain human adaptive physiology? Because I've been studying your species' reactions for the past 18 hours, and I have some fascinating observations about comparative evolutionary development." The fact that she knew his name and rank, despite being a supposedly helpless prisoner, sent shock waves through the Zinthri command structure. It meant the humans had been gathering intelligence while appearing to be victims. Marcus stepped forward to address their captors directly. We appreciate the workout facility you've provided, but we should discuss the terms of our release. You've demonstrated your ship's gravitational manipulation capabilities, and we've demonstrated human adaptive resilience. Both sides have learned valuable information about each other's capabilities. His tone was calm, professional, and completely confident. He was speaking not as a desperate prisoner, but as a military officer conducting negotiations from a position of strength. Furthermore, Dr. Vasquez added, your power consumption for maintaining these gravitational fields is approaching critical levels. My engineering colleagues have been monitoring your ship's energy signature fluctuations. You're sacrificing operational capability to maintain this demonstration. James nodded in agreement. In cargo operations, we call this operational inefficiency. You're spending more resources on containing us than we're worth as prisoners. Basic cost-benefit analysis suggests you should reconsider your approach. Sarah completed another set of exercises and joined the impromptu negotiation. Also, you might want to consider that everything you're learning about human capabilities is being recorded by our ship's automated systems. Earth military intelligence will analyze your methods and develop countermeasures. You're providing free training data to a potential adversary. The humans had shifted the entire dynamic of their captivity. They were no longer helpless prisoners being tortured for information. They had become a threat that was actively gathering intelligence while demonstrating capabilities that exceeded their captors' expectations. Supreme Chancellor Thexvar's stress pheromones were now detectable throughout the observation area. Commander Vextal, explain how prisoners have gained tactical advantage over their captors. Vextal's mandibles clicked nervously. Supreme Chancellor, our interrogation protocols were designed for species with normal adaptive capabilities. These humans appear to possess enhancement potential that approaches technological augmentation levels. The truth was becoming clear to the Zinthri leadership. They had captured what they believed to be a weak exploration crew, but they had actually imprisoned representatives of a species whose natural capabilities exceeded anything in their experience. Marcus completed his final exercise routine and stood at attention, facing the viewing port directly. Chancellor, we're prepared to discuss terms for our release. We've demonstrated that continued detention serves no useful purpose and actively compromises your ship's operational security. The detention chamber had become a negotiating room where humans held the strategic advantage despite being technically imprisoned. The Zinthri were discovering that some species couldn't be broken by environmental torture because they had evolved to turn environmental stress into evolutionary advantage. The next move belonged to the Zinthri, but they were rapidly running out of options that didn't result in acknowledging human superiority in a conflict they had initiated. The Zinthri High Council emergency session had devolved into chaos. For the first time in their recorded history, a captured species had turned interrogation protocols into a demonstration of superiority. Supreme Chancellor Thexvar faced a decision that would reshape their understanding of galactic power dynamics. Options, he demanded curtly. Commander Vextal's report was sobering. We can maintain current gravitational pressure for approximately 2 more hours before critical system failures begin. The humans show no signs of deterioration and have explicitly offered to negotiate their release. Chief Engineer Zek Moore added technical context that made their situation even more precarious. Continuing this operation will require shutting down defensive systems and propulsion. We'll be vulnerable to any Earth military response if their ship's automated distress beacon has been transmitting our location. In the detention chamber, Marcus and his team had organized themselves into what could only be described as a diplomatic formation. They had proven their point about human resilience. Now they were prepared to demonstrate human strategic thinking. Dr. Vasquez, Marcus said formally, please present your analysis of Zinthri capabilities and limitations based on our observations. Elena stepped forward, her scientific training allowing her to maintain professional composure despite the extreme gravitational stress. Based on 18 hours of observation under controlled conditions, I can provide a comprehensive assessment of Zinthri technological capabilities, psychological patterns, and strategic vulnerabilities. She addressed the viewing port directly, knowing their captors were monitoring every word. Your gravitational manipulation technology is impressive but energy-intensive. Your species' psychology appears to be built around environmental control as a primary dominant strategy. When that strategy fails, you lack adaptive backup protocols. Her analysis was delivered with the calm precision of a university lecturer, making it clear that humans had been conducting scientific research while appearing to be victims of torture. James added his own observations from an operational perspective. Your crew efficiency has decreased by approximately 30% over the past 6 hours. Stress responses among your personnel are visible through body language analysis. Your command structure is experiencing decision paralysis. Sarah contributed practical engineering assessment. Your ship's power distribution system has design limitations that create cascading vulnerabilities. Prolonged high-energy operations compromise multiple secondary systems. Basic maintenance protocols are being sacrificed for this interrogation. The humans had done more than survive Xanthari torture. They had conducted a comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation that provided detailed analysis of their captors' capabilities and weaknesses. Supreme Chancellor Thexvar listened to this assessment through the monitoring system with growing unease. These prisoners had somehow turned their detention into a reconnaissance mission that had gathered more useful intelligence than most Xanthari military operations. They're offering to negotiate, Commander Vextal reported. But they're negotiating from a position of demonstrated strength rather than defeated submission. Marcus stepped forward to address the viewing port directly. Chancellor Thexvar, we propose a mutually beneficial resolution to this situation. You've learned valuable information about human capabilities. We've learned about Xanthari technology and tactics. Both sides can benefit from formal diplomatic contact rather than continued confrontation. His tone was professional, confident, and completely reasonable. He was offering the Xanthari a face-saving way out of a situation that had spiraled beyond their control. We propose immediate release with return to our ship, establishment of formal diplomatic protocols between Earth and the Xanthari Collective, and mutual exchange of non-sensitive scientific information that benefits both species. Dr. Vasquez added scientific context to the proposal. Human adaptability makes us excellent research partners for evolutionary biology and environmental adaptation studies. Xanthari gravitational technology has applications in human space exploration and planetary development. Cooperation serves both species better than conflict. The proposal was elegant in its simplicity and logic. The humans were offering to turn their captivity into the foundation for beneficial diplomatic relations while providing the Xanthari with a way to claim the encounter had been a successful first contact rather than a failed interrogation. Supreme Chancellor Thexvar consulted with his senior staff through private communications. The consensus was clear. Continued detention served no purpose and actively damaged Xanthari credibility. The humans had proven they couldn't be broken by standard methods and had demonstrated capabilities that made them potentially dangerous adversaries. Commander Vextal, the Chancellor ordered, begin reduction of gravitational pressure to standard levels. Prepare diplomatic protocols for formal prisoner exchange. But Marcus wasn't finished demonstrating human strategic thinking. Chancellor, we appreciate your decision. However, we should clarify that we're not prisoners being exchanged. We're diplomats who have just completed an unusual but productive first contact session. The reframing was masterful. Marcus had transformed their entire experience from captivity and torture into diplomatic dialogue and cultural exchange. The Xanthari could claim they had successfully initiated contact with a new species rather than admitting they had failed to break human resistance. As the gravity slowly returned to normal levels, something remarkable happened. The humans didn't collapse with relief or show signs of exhaustion. Instead, they maintained military bearing and professional composure, making it clear that the extreme conditions had been an inconvenience rather than genuine hardship. Final demonstration, Marcus announced to his team. Show them what human recovery capability looks like. As the gravitational pressure decreased, the humans began what could only be described as a cool-down routine. They stretched, performed light exercises, and demonstrated that their bodies were not only undamaged by the experience, but had actually benefited from it. Dr. Vasquez conducted a rapid self-assessment protocol that proved all human physiological systems were operating at optimal levels. Muscle density increased approximately 12%. Cardiovascular efficiency improved 15%. Bone density shows enhancement consistent with beneficial stress adaptation. The torture session had literally made the human stronger. Commander Vextal initiated prisoner release protocols with profound unease. Supreme Chancellor, how do we classify this encounter in official records? Thexvar's response would become standard Zinthri policy regarding human contact. Diplomatic first contact with a species possessing unusual adaptive capabilities. Recommend establishment of formal relations based on mutual respect and scientific exchange. As the detention chamber doors opened, Marcus led his team out with military precision. They walked with the bearing of soldiers completing a successful mission rather than prisoners being released from captivity. Chancellor Thexvar, Marcus said formally as they prepared to leave, "Thank you for the training opportunity. Earth military conditioning programs will benefit from the data we've gathered about high-gravity exercise protocols." The humans departed the Zinthri ship with diplomatic honors, having transformed what was intended to be their execution into the foundation for interspecies cooperation. 6 months later, the first official Earth-Zinthri scientific exchange program would be established. Zinthri gravitational technology would revolutionize human space exploration, while human adaptive training methods would help Zinthri colonists survive on previously uninhabitable worlds. The detention chamber where humans had been tortured became a memorial to the power of resilience over oppression, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come not from fighting your enemies, but from proving that their weapons cannot break your spirit. Marcus Chin's 1,000 push-ups under crushing gravity would be remembered as the moment humanity announced itself to the galaxy not as another species to be conquered, but as allies worthy of respect and partners capable of turning any challenge into an opportunity for growth.